What's going on, everyone? I'm here with a little bit of an impromptu video actually, and it's regarding some of the results during this week 5 set of games, and specifically talking injuries in an already brutal year that got even worse today with the Odell Beckham injury during the Giants and Chargers game. Now, I want to talk obviously fantasy outlook. That's what everyone cares about. I'll talk a little bit on the injury itself, and then some of the other issues regarding the Giants wide receivers, because there were injuries other than the Odell injury to that wide receiver core. So let's get right into it. Now, the injury to Odell himself happened late in the fourth quarter, and as I'm sure a lot of you already know, it is a fractured ankle. He looked, that is Odell, to be in a lot of pain, had to be carted off the field, and it obviously is very severe. It's already week 5, fractured ankle, gonna require surgery, gonna require rehab, and it'll require a lot of time to heal. So with that being said, I think it's safe to say, unfortunately for all you Odell owners, for the Giants as well, Odell's season is probably done, and you have to find a replacement as fantasy owners and as the Giants themselves do. Now, interestingly enough, on this day where Odell probably stole the headlines, there were some other Giant receivers that went down, and their injuries didn't look that good either. Now, I'm referencing actually two pretty big names in Brandon Marshall and Sterling Shepard. Marshall had to be carted off, and Shepard had to be helped off the field onto the sideline. So as of yet, they were all ankle injuries. We don't really know the severity with the Marshall or with the Sterling Shepard injury, but they did not look good. Probably not as bad as the Odell injuries, but nonetheless, that wide receiver core for the Giants took a severe hit today. So let's actually talk what to do if you are a fantasy owner for any of these guys, but primarily for Odell. So if you're an Odell guy, you pretty much lost your first round pick, your wide receiver 1. So what can you do? Well, at this point, unless you have some stash on your bench that you can plug in as a wide receiver, you're going to have to do your best either via trades or via the waiver wire. Now, what I personally would suggest is waiver wire, unless you have a very, again, stacked team where you have really good running backs or a couple of elite tight ends or quarterbacks that you can flip one for a pretty decent wide receiver in return. I would suggest the waiver wire. And, a good place to normally start would be the team where the original player got hurt on. But as I mentioned before, Marshall got hurt, Sterling Shepard got hurt. And we all saw what that Giants offense was the first couple of weeks without Odell Beckham. It is just a completely different team. The pressure getting to Eli is a lot more severe because defenses don't have to worry about the receivers getting separation. Basically, they don't have to worry about the threat of Odell being on the field. So that allows maybe a little bit more man-to-man, roughing up those guys on the outside. And Eli has to be in the pocket for longer. That offensive line collapses faster. The running game is less of a threat. So what can we do? Well, I will start with some of the names on this Giants roster. Now, if I had to guess, I would say Sterling Shepard will be back sooner than Brandon Marshall. So if he is somehow still on the waiver wire, go after a guy like Sterling Shepard. If you have him on your bench and he plays next week or whenever he comes back, he will be that wide receiver 1, I'm here to tell you. And that was kind of apparent even before the Odell injury, that at least he was the next guy up after Odell. Brandon Marshall hadn't quite caught on yet. He was struggling a little bit, some drops, things like that. We saw, on the other hand, some other receivers that kind of took advantage of the situation, specifically talking Roger Lewis. He did only have 1 catch. It was late in the game. It was a touchdown. So he had 1 single catch. It did go for a touchdown. He's only in his 2nd season, so he's still young. If I had to guess, though, I would say, you can take a flyer on him and add him but he will not be a reliable guy because, again, the Giants will struggle getting the ball out there. If I had to put my money on it, I would actually wouldn't be too surprised if the Giants added a free agent in terms of a free agent wide receiver. Maybe bringing a guy in like Victor Cruz back. That would make sense. But actually, the people that I think are going to benefit the most from these set of injuries, as bad as that sounds, are guys like Wayne Gallman, Shane Vereen, and Evan Ingram. So we have seen the tight end Ingram be successful before. He got shut out today, surprisingly, didn't have a single catch. But for example, Gallman, he was heavily involved in the game today. He did get out-touched by Darkwa in the backfield, at least in terms of yardage and also a touchdown. Gallman actually had 3 more carries than Darkwa, but had less yards, and again didn't have any touchdowns. But Gallman was involved in the receiving game with 5 receptions for 25 yards. So I think since he is becoming more of that target in the receiving game, that'll continue to evolve, especially with these wide receiver injuries. Also, Shane Vereen. Shane Vereen has always been that pass-catching running back. He will now probably become even more so an option. Vereen and Gallman pretty similar in terms of what they bring, but Gallman's being used more as a runner. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Perkins comes back, but I think Gallman and Darkwa have both done enough to put themselves in front of Perkins. So I would say, as far as guys that you should pick up if they are still available, these would be my rankings and in the order that you should target them in. First of all, Sterling Shepard. Depending on the Brendan Marshall injury, Brendan Marshall afterwards, then Evan Ingram, the tight end. Afterwards, I would probably put Gallman slightly above Shane Vereen because Gallman is getting some of those rushing carries still. So in that order, finishing it off, like I said, Shane Vereen, and then possibly Roger Lewis, depending on, again, when Shepard and Brendan Marshall come back. So as far as other wide receiver names that you can look at, I'll touch more on that during my weekly waiver wire ad video. This is going to be a pretty big focus in terms of wide receivers this week because of these injuries. But as always, let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with this? Do you agree with the guys that could potentially replace Odell Beckham? If you are an Odell owner and you have a different mindset with this, what are you thinking? What might you do? How are you going to proceed? And who are you going to target? So yeah, as always, comment. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe, and I will see you guys later this week.